I would like to welcome Evelina Balestri. Hi, Evelina.
Hey, Nesreen, thank you so much for having me on your program.
Evelina is a Catholic author and editor from the historic borderlands of Maryland and Pennsylvania. How you learned about Imam Hussain, especially being a non-Muslim, and the events that transpired in Karbala leading to that dreadful day of Ashura.
I remember my first sort of brushes with the story were through Muslim friends. And I would see on social media around the month of Muharram where there would be posts talking about, Karbala and this battle that I vaguely knew, had significance. But the more I saw specific posts, the more I started to become curious about the different characters involved in it.
Would you mind reading uh, your poetry, and we can, for the viewers, the benefit of the viewers as well?
Light upon light, splendor upon splendor, piercing the armored night. And it asks the heavens, where is Yazid? And where is Abbas? And where is Hussein? Ask the people and their God, and this will be your answer. Follow the path of the pilgrims, and they will show you who is dead and who is alive. Hussein is where La ilaha illallah is, and the idea that, if you are standing for God, then who can stand against you? And it doesn't. There's a line, from Christian tradition which says, you can kill us, but you cannot harm us.
Do we see anyone commemorating Yazid, this tyrant
Mm.
of that time? Or look at Imam Hussain, where on the occasion, for example, month of Muharram, millions around the world are commemorating his legacy, commemorating his martyrdom. And then 40 days after his martyrdom, during the season of Arba'in, you will find millions and millions and millions going to the land of Iraq, specifically in the towards the holy land of Karbala, within Iraq as well as, of course, internationally. So, in your opinion, Avelina, what does, maybe just briefly, what does Imam Hussein represent to you as a Christian, a devout Christian?
So yeah, now again, as a Catholic, I come from a tradition that really has a long history of pilgrimage. So it's something that is very, relatable to me in terms of that form of showing one's devotion to God and the saints, the holy ones of God. Just in brief, I also just want to mention one of my favorite figures from Karbala is Rubab, Hussein's wife, who was the mother of both Sakina and Ali Asghar. And she loses ultimately both her children as well as her husband.
Many years ago, why are we still here sitting there and crying and shedding tears and having these gatherings? But history repeats itself. There's a saying, history repeats itself. And what we see that's going on in Gaza is a perfect example. It's
Mhm.
Nothing's going to equate, of course, to what happened in Karbala. That's the epitome of tragedies. But we see these tragedies. The Palestinian people, how many years have they suffered with their land taken away from them, their rights, their freedom, the basic rights that you and I enjoy, and we don't even think twice. We could just walk out of our home, and for the most part, we feel safe. We could do
Mhm.
what we wish to do. How about those people who don't know what the meaning of freedom? Assalamu alaikum. That is, peace be upon you. I welcome you to this segment on Truths Revealed channel as we discuss the significance and impact of the month of Muharram. That is the month of mourning for millions of people, particularly Muslims globally. But first, with me, I would like to welcome Evelina Balestri. Hi, Evelina.
Hey, Nesreen, thank you so much for having me on your program.
My pleasure. Evelina is a Catholic author and editor from the historic borderlands of Maryland and Pennsylvania. Her stories, poems, and essays have been featured in over 30 print and online publications. She has published two novels, Saplings of Sherwood and Gone for a Shoulder, and a poetry collection, Pendragon's Shields, as well as participating in several anthologies. She is the editor-in-chief of Fellow and Fairy Dust and a literary magazine inspiring faith and creativity and exploring the arts through a spiritual lens. Under its auspices, she hosted two interfaith conferences, one in Oxford University and the other at Cambridge University. With that, I will jump into our short discussion regarding the significance of Imam al-Hussein, who was born in Medina. Imam al-Hussein was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, who is the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima al-Zahra. His life culminated in the tragic yet heroic battle of Karbala, where he and his followers were martyred, resisting the tyrannical Umayyad Caliph Yazid. This event, commemorated annually on Ashura during Muharram, symbolizes the eternal fight against justice, that is, truth against falsehood. Imam Hussain, who is a significant, in fact, one of the most significant figures in Islam, is mainly known for his opposition to oppression. His famous statement that rings for centuries to come, "I will not bow down to oppression, even if it costs my life." Imam Hussain believed in truth and justice and refused to bow down to tyranny. And of course, this is very, very relevant in today's time, especially with the plethora of corruption and oppression that we see globally. And this is something that we take Imam Hussain as an inspiration to remind us of the importance of speaking up against injustice. With that said, I would like to ask you, Evelina, the first question. You have written poetry and articles regarding Karbala and Arba'in, and you have a unique background. I'm curious to know how you learned about Imam Hussain, especially being a non-Muslim, and the events that transpired in Karbala leading to that dreadful day of Ashura. And what were your thoughts and initial reactions?
Yeah, so I remember my first sort of brushes with the story were through Muslim friends. And I would see on social media around the month of Muharram where there would be posts talking about, Karbala and this battle that I vaguely knew, had significance. But the more I saw specific posts, the more I started to become curious about the different characters involved in it and the struggles and the sufferings that they underwent during this, heroic last stand, really. And I come from a background being very interested in world military history. So I have a lot of interest in different world battles, for example. And I've always had a particular interest in kind of last stand stories because they do deal with something within the human character when pushed to a brink, when pushed to very much against the wall. Will people be willing to still stand, even if, their fate is sealed effectively? If it seems inevitable, will they still stand and fight and bear witness? And this kind of goes into the meaning of martyrdom as well. And as you mentioned, I come from a Christian background, Catholic background, and martyrdom is very, very important to us as a concept. And the idea of bearing witness to something. So, of course, with the Christian martyrs, it's bearing witness to Christ. With the story of Ashura, though, and the story of Hussein, one can certainly see on a universal level that he bore witness to his God, to his family, to his beliefs against a tyrant. And that is something that, again, there are so many stories around the world that what makes them have lasting, staying power are these elements, because they do, again, deal with that part of humanity that comes out when it is tested most, and it kind of shows who I suppose has become most, truly living up to the ideal of humanity, if you will. And then it
Right.
shines in sharp contrast to those who have failed to do so. So the story just really captivated me that way. And again, I became very interested in the character of Hussein, and not just, reducible to Karbala
Yeah.
either,
Yeah.
but his whole legacy,
Legacy.
because he was also, a scholar and a sage, really, and had all of these very laudable characteristics of, generosity and justice and a great
Right.
deal of love for his family. Just a very compelling character to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as were many of the other figures around him in this situation, like his siblings, Zainab and Abbas, and
Right.
so on. So again, that really got me interested, and that's when I started to write
Hmm.
poetry and articles, as you mentioned, and started to work on my screenplay project, still very much in the works,
Hmm.
called River of Milk,
Right.
which is supposed to be a reference to the Nasheed in the field Janati, so which
Right.
references the Ahl Bayt and Hussein.
And I think, this is a great testament, Avelina, of how someone outside, you know the realm of Islam. Some people might think, oh, Imam Hussein is just for Muslims. Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
Imam Hussein is a global university of a set of ethics and principles, the true meaning of loyalty, the true meaning of proper conduct, the true
Mm-hmm.
meaning of love, the true meaning of humanity. What does it mean to be human? To the point that even, for example, when the enemies in Karbala tried to prevent him, and in fact prevented him and his camp from the simple right of water, and they were in the scorching desert, very, very thirsty, as you can imagine. Fast forward later, in during the battle, when Imam Hussein had that little bit of access, very temporarily, the last thing he did was to exhibit the same type of behavior. In fact, he offered them water, because at the end of the day, it's about our behavior, how we
Mm-hmm.
deal with people. It's not about revenge. It's not about tit for tat. And this just a small snippet of the character of Imam Hussein. And then also, of course, how, like you mentioned, his story has become a very inspiring story, and it's actually more than a story. It's like you said, a legacy. It's a way
Mm-hmm.
of life. It teaches us how we can break free from the shackles of what we sometimes get tied into, maybe caving ourselves to, the do's and don'ts, and maybe sometimes fear from losing our materialistic aspects of our life, for example, money or power or job. But Imam Hussein taught us that we never sacrifice our principles just for the sake of materialistic gain. And I know, Evelina, I've read your poetry on Arba'in. You have a really inspiring poetry. Would you mind reading uh, your poetry, and we can, for the viewers, the benefit of the viewers as well?
Sure. So this poem, entitled Arba'in,
Mhm.
was written after a friend of mine from Iran very kindly basically took me on a video tour when he went on pilgrimage to Karbala in Iraq. And it was quite a moving experience for me, getting to feel like I was a part of that through live stream effectively. And he took me on kind of a tour inside of the shrine of Abbas and the sort of walkway between the two shrines. And so it was quite moving to me, and I was really touched that he had included me in that because he knew of my interest. So that was what inspired the writing of this poem.
And that walkway, by the way, is called Bain al Haramain. You might recall that terminology, Bain al
Yeah.
Haramain. It's a blessed area where a lot of worshippers, congregate,
Oh,
worship,
yes.
and express their love for Imam Hussein, as well as his brother, his beloved brother Abbas.
Mhm. Yes, yeah, I noticed that of again seeing all of the people that were there engaged in those rituals. It again extremely moving to me to witness. So yeah, I'm going to just read through it. Everything is shimmering in the shrines of the slain, starlit crystal capturing song and the moan of the mourners, fermented yet fresh, like the river of wine that flows beside the milk, passion and purity drained to the last drop for the desert to drink. Here the water-bearer rests beyond the glinting grate, and there his kin commander, whose revolution still rallies. Between the two, a bridge, people to the left and right, drawn by searing memories of red sands. Tea is poured and bread broken, strangers sharing sustenance and lamentations. We stand in the middle, at the center of this sacredness. The monument is golden, like the dawn of the slaughter, with the dome of defeat still voicing victory, brazen beneath Iraq's moon, light upon light, splendor upon splendor, piercing the armored night. And it asks the heavens, where is Yazid? And where is Abbas? And where is Hussein? Ask the people and their God, and this will be your answer. Follow the path of the pilgrims, and they will show you who is dead and who is alive.
Beautiful, just amazing and beautiful.
Thank you.
This last segment, and I recall when I first read your poetry over a year ago, this last segment where you talk about, where is Yazid, where is Abbas, where is Hussein, and then you end it with, follow the path of pilgrims, and they will show you who is dead and who is alive. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by who is dead and who is alive? I think the viewers can clearly get to the point that you're making, but if you can elaborate, because I think it has a beautiful meaning behind it.
Sure. So, in part, these lines were inspired by some nasheeds that exist in which they will ask, where is Yazid and where is Hussein? And so that was very haunting to me, very something that just stuck in my memory of the question that is being posed. And the way that I tried to explore it is indeed, you know, tyrants may seem to triumph, but in the end, they have been defeated already. It's sort of like walking corpses. If they embrace modes of being that are ultimately destructive, I think that in a broader sense, I believe that that's what sin is. Sin is modes of being that sort of embrace a pathway towards destruction, which even when you're on the pathway of that destruction, you in a way are dead already. And so that has been what Yazid has come to represent for so many wonderful poets down through the ages. I think of Rumi talked about this as well. He would discuss about the inner Yazid and the inner Hussein and things of this nature, that we all have an aspect of ourselves that pulls toward Yazid, that is corruptible, that longs for the material gratification, and that, again, would lead us astray. But then there's also that potential within us towards being Hussein, the self-sacrificial hero, the pious warrior sage. There's all of those things. And again, even though Hussein and his followers are slain at Karbala, it is he who is truly alive through his legacy, through being vindicated by the highest judge, which he always understood to be the one, to be God. So, and that was in one of the nasheeds. They even have, when they ask this question, and they say, where is Yazid and where is Hussein? They will respond in one of the responses that Hussein is where La ilaha illallah is, and the idea that if you are standing for God, then who can stand against you? And it doesn't. There's a line, from Christian tradition which says, you can kill us, but you cannot harm us. Uh, Christian martyrs understood. So the idea would be that even if they kill you, again, Christ says in the Gospels, they can, you know, even if they destroy the body, they cannot destroy the soul, essentially. This is really what I
Right.
think the entire focus is when it comes to martyrs of, again, both traditions, I believe, that those
Yes.
who really bear witness to this.
And we have in fact a Quranic verse exactly touching on your point, where it talks about martyrs, بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون, that they're not the martyrs are not dead. They might be physically dead, but we need to be thinking beyond the physical state of
Hmm.
whatever we see. It in fact it confirms that they are alive, and they're alive because of the legacy, the beautiful legacy that they built, because of the blood that they shed for the sake of God, right? Not for the sake of
Hmm.
show, not for the sake of anything, but purely with sincerity to the Almighty God. And then their selflessness. And I know you mentioned this earlier, the sacrifice and selflessness. And this is one of the many aspects of Imam Hussein, how he is unique, that he
Hmm.
never at once, even at the plains of Karbala, thought about himself. Never. So this is and I think the concept of being dead versus alive is also very evident today. Thousands of years later, do we see anyone commemorating Yazid, this tyrant
Hmm.
of that time? But look at Imam Hussein, where on the occasion, for example, month of Muharram, millions around the world are commemorating his legacy, commemorating his martyrdom. And then 40 days after his martyrdom, during the season of Arba'in, you will find millions and millions and millions going to the land of Iraq, specifically in the towards the holy land of Karbala, within Iraq, as well as, of course, internationally. And then they will walk on their foot, even
Hmm.
if it's on the heatness of the, in Iraq, it could be pretty hot in the summer. They will walk for days and days until they reach the holy shrine and bid their respects to this noble personality. Where would you ever see this type of miracle? And,
Hmm.
and unfortunately, I have to mention that the media is not projecting this.
Yeah.
Somehow, it's a blind eye. Where do we ever see this type of miracle and this type of love and this type of passion towards a person who has already passed many years ago? Only Imam Hussein, you will see this type of unique status which God has given him. So, in your opinion, Avelina, what does, maybe just briefly, what does Imam Hussein represent to you as a Christian, a devout Christian? What significance does Arba'in have, as you hear? I'm sure every year you hear, oh, this is
Mhm.
around the time of Arba'in, and people who walk from all facets of life, long distances to paid respect. If you can share your thoughts.
Sure. So yeah, now, again, as a Catholic, I come from a tradition that really has a long history of pilgrimage. So it's something that is very, relatable to me in terms of that form of of showing one's devotion to God and the saints, the holy ones of God. There are, various Catholic pilgrimage sites that, have been, the sites of these long, as you say, on foot pilgrimages for centuries upon centuries now, for millennia. And so it's something that I can look at and see Muslim friends engaging in and just really feel my heart warmed for it, because I know that strenuousness of pilgrimage. I'm aware of it through my tradition, and I know the heart that goes into that. and the love, as you said, that goes into that. And it's sort of a mind, body, soul exercise, isn't it? Where one is taking their body to a different location, often through strenuousness, putting your body through exertion in order to bring your soul to kind of a height
Wider
and go
soul.
through an
Yeah.
experience.
Mhm.
And it's interesting because what you were just saying was reminding me of the fact I agree with you. The media doesn't cover Arba'in barely at all. I mean, really, and it's such a large pilgrimage. People forget how large this is. But yeah, no, it isn't. I would say they don't honestly cover our pilgrimages very well either. And I think part of the reason for this is because the Western world has gotten very, very secularized,
Right.
toxically so. And I remember having this conversation, interestingly enough, when I brought up Arba'in to a friend of mine who is a former Christian, now atheist, and we were talking about having something of a debate regarding religious belief in general. And I realized that she had kind of her block up, if you will, towards Christian tradition. She didn't want to hear about that, and she had all kinds of negative
Right.
sort of feelings associated with it. And so I tried to kind of bring her to think about what, okay, if you don't want to think about it from like the benefits I was saying of fasting and prayer and pilgrimage from a Christian point of view, if you have blocks up with that, well, there are certainly other traditions, other cultures in the world that also demonstrate this to a, I would say, heroic extent, honestly. And so I was bringing up to her about Arba'in and about the story of Hussein and saying, do you not see a certain universality in this,
Yeah.
in what I would
Yeah.
consider the universal longing for God? And this kind of, again, brings another Bible verse to mind here, but it's as the deer pants for running streams, so my soul is thirsting for God. And I feel like that really is observable, in devout people of, both traditions and other traditions as well, but that true willingness, again, to put oneself out for love. And I think that sadly, and again, in some cases, when it comes to atheists, they may have had bad experiences with religious people or religion, but I feel like sometimes they put on certain blinders where they
Right.
can't
Right.
see the true depths of of people who exhibit, again, a devotion like that. And I think that they tend to again think that, oh, the world would be better off without religion, the world would be so much more enlightened and great. And I'm like, no, the world would just become, well, and I think it has become incredibly selfish and self-motivated and materialistic, because there's nothing transcendent telling us to love God and love our neighbor.
Yeah.
So that
It would be like a
ultimately would be
jungle
chaos.
without
Yeah,
religion. That means no rules. You do whatever you want. It would
yeah,
be a jungle.
exactly.
It's already many times we do feel like we're living in a jungle, even with religion like Christianity, Judaism. These are all we're all people of the book,
Mm-hmm.
and we respect these religion. We pray at the end of the day. We pray to one God, but it's our weaknesses that make us sin and become selfish and materialistic and step over others emotionally or physically and so on and so forth, and then unfortunately take it to the extreme step of oppressing others, right? So
Mm-hmm.
but religion brings things into perspective. So I appreciate your point about uh, for those who try to just remove or hope to remove the concept of religion. I think I hope that we, through discussions like this, could help to remove those blinders that you mentioned, even for
Yeah.
yourself, Avelina, that the fact that you are a great example of someone who, we all have blinders, right? We
Mm-hmm.
kind of like to look at just what we're our bubble, but
Mm-hmm.
you opened up your mind to look elsewhere and say, okay, what is this thing about Karbala? What is this thing about Arba'in? Who is this Imam Hussein? And that's how we grow, that's how we thrive,
Mhm.
when we look at the religions and see and appreciate the noble personalities that represent justice, that represent purity, that represent love and devotion. That's what makes us human.
Mhm. One thought I had very quickly when we were talking about religious example, I just want to mention the fact that I personally, I know many, many people have been moved by the example of Palestinians
So
who have shown amazing levels of faith and endurance under incredibly traumatic, experiences that they have been enduring and suffering. And people who, I know some atheists again that they can be very much like, oh well, you know, they will dismiss faith in God because this, that, or another bad thing happens in the world. And I'm like, you realize, have you watched some of these people, literally going
endurance.
through what I can only call a crucible experience, and they have not lost their faith in God. It truly, truly is astonishing and moving.
I'm so happy that you mentioned this point, because that was one of the things I wanted to touch upon briefly. I know we have a limited time, but you know, uh, a lot of times, we might think, oh, Karbala, or people might be, oh, this is something that happened, on the battlefield
Mhm.
many years ago. Why are we still here sitting there and crying and shedding tears and having these gatherings? But history repeats itself. There's a saying, history repeats itself. And what we see that's going on in Gaza is a perfect example. It's
Mhm.
nothing's going to equate, of course, to what happened in Karbala. That's the epitome of tragedies. But we see these tragedies. The Palestinian people, how many years have they suffered with their land taken away from them, their rights, their freedom, the basic rights that you and I enjoy, and we don't even think twice. We could just walk out of our home, and for the most part, we feel safe. We could do
Mhm.
what we wish to do. How about those people who don't know what the meaning of freedom is, what the meaning of being sleeping in the night, not knowing whether you're going to wake up the next day, or whether if this is going to be the last hug that you have with one of your family members. But yet, like you rightly mentioned, they continue to persevere, they continue to stand up for their rights. They didn't hold up their hands and say, okay, it's okay, we do whatever you want, we'll give you up. No, this resistance is exactly the implementation of the message of Imam Hussain, that we need to not become subservient to the powers that be. We need to stand up with grace, with honor, and with faith in God, because at the end of the day, God watches everything. And for sure, He is the just. And the day will come where every oppressor will meet their fate and will
Mhm.
uh, uh, pay the consequences of their actions. And so
Absolutely. And I think that, yeah, and I think that what you mentioned there with regards to the tradition of the mourning and shedding tears, as you said, that it brings to mind another tradition within Catholic thought. But another reason why I think inevitably one, when one is raised as a Catholic, we're raised very much focused on Passiontide traditions. So pertaining to memorial traditions, all manner of them, with regards to Christ's passion that we believe happened, and
right.
Christ's death on the cross and then resurrection. But so there's a saying that is often attributed to Saint Augustine, which is more important than even like a year-long fast on bread and water would be shedding a few tears in memorial of Christ's passion, because it is an act of compassion in this depth of connection to Christ's suffering. And, obviously there are different theologies at play here, but I can't help but see certainly um, elements of this at play in the Muslim remembrances of Hussein, especially within the Shia tradition. And it is quite, fascinating and moving to me how that again tradition is played out in so many gatherings with so much art as well, art and
Right.
beauty of poetry and a song and so forth. It is very,
Paintings as
very
well.
incredible.
There's a lot there. What's beautiful is that every person who has respect and regard for Imam Hussein's legacy has this opportunity to express. It's just like you wrote your poetry on Arba'in, and you have other poetry as well. You know, though there are those who are maybe artistic in terms of painting. They can paint some images of what happened on that dreadful day on Ashura, on the plains of Karbala. There's those who are able to share the knowledge and the historical aspect of what happened in Karbala, and then tie it with the lessons, because ultimately we commemorate through majalis, as you may know, and where we congregate together, we reminisce some aspects of the events of Karbala, the personality of Imam Hussein, his friends and companions, their diligence, their loyalty, and so on and so forth. But it's not just about storytelling. We have to walk out ready to change and do self-reform. And that is ultimately the message of Imam Hussein, is that we need to look within ourselves, and what the goal from these majalis or these gatherings and these tears. The tears are very powerful because it moves us, right? It softens our heart. Sometimes, days pass by, we get so engrossed into this very materialistic life, trying to just run after, growth and self-development, which is part of life. It's nothing wrong, of course, career development and trying to make a better life for yourself. In fact, it's a responsibility. You have to take care of your responsibility. But how to do that without losing sense of what is important, without losing yourself, your emotion, and tears can have a huge can result in a huge transformation through the tears of Muharram and Karbala. And crying for Imam Hussein surely has that impact for many. And we hope and pray that it becomes beyond more than just tears, but actually to help us change our life to become better human beings at the end.
Absolutely. And I just have you're saying so many good things, and I have thoughts. Yeah, with regards to the idea of storytelling having actual effect, it actually brings to mind a quote from the playwright General John Burgoyne, but he said that true art must have some relationship with nature, truth, and sense. And so what I was thinking with regards to, again, religious storytelling within given religious traditions, whether it is Christians reflecting on the Passion of Christ or the saints, or Muslims reflecting on their heroic figures, and as you say, in this particular case, Hussein and his family and companions, there is this element of reflecting, again, something that is these universals of nature, reflections on our nature as human beings, and the struggles and the quandaries that we face up and down history, really. And truth, it must be true. There must be something in the story that rings true, both in the sense of actual, like factual truth in this case, but also truth in an even deeper sense, truth in the sense that goes beyond facts, something that is true to, again, our natures, and sense, something that does touch upon the senses. So when we think about the tears, for example, that is harrowing something up within our senses, because we are sensual beings in that sense. We have our, five senses, etc. And so it appeals to those things, and that is what I think true art is. And I definitely see that with regards to, again, the various gatherings and traditions in the month of Muharram. I've watched many of them on YouTube and Facebook and so forth. So always, gain something from that. So it is, again, very moving to me.
Absolutely. And I think just some final thoughts. We all struggle daily. We're tested, right? No human being, I would say, goes, long time that passes by without some challenge in their life. And sometimes it's a challenge that actually makes us stronger, right? And the story of Karbala is very, very important, because we see personalities like the sister of Imam Hussein, Zainab, Lady Zainab that you mentioned. She is the epitome example of patience. One of her names is Jabal Sabr, the mountain of patience. And how did she endure all of these tragedies and losing so many people, not just people, close and loved ones and holy personalities in just a matter of a few hours? Can if we were to imagine anything of just one person, our own loved one, passing away, it's very, very emotionally draining, and it is a true test. But Lady Zainab has taught us for many centuries to come this concept of patience. And I think, for everyone, the viewers who might be going through difficult times, whether it's small or big, that's all subjective. Everyone goes through their journey. To take inspiration of a personality, this particular Lady Zainab, look into who she is. How did she handle the event of Ashura and post Ashura, how she took leadership of the children and the women and led them and was strong. And she didn't let this make her weak. In fact, and she would speak up against the oppressor of her time with courage, yet with modesty. So, there's just so much we can go on and on. I know we're out of time, but if you have any final thoughts before we wrap up,
Sure. Yeah. Just in brief, I also just want to mention one of my favorite figures from Karbala is Rubab, Hussein's wife, who was the mother of both Sakina and Ali Asghar. And she loses ultimately both her children as well as her husband, and ends up writing poetry, lamentation about her husband, and speaking about how she will never remarry, and praising his virtues, his generosity. She says, where will the widows and the orphans go now that you are gone, and so forth. Beautiful, beautiful lamentation, and again, waiting to lie between the sands with him, and so forth. And of course, she's believed not to have long survived after Karbala. And so, it's quite a tragic romance element to it with her, but also just, again, as you said, with Zainab, this strength and endurance. And well, and again, like with Zainab, her one of her famous lines was, I see nothing but beauty, which ties into, I think, so many aspects of this story, that even though it's a very bloody story, very heart-wrenching story, I think we can say, we see nothing but beauty in it in the overall. And I think the same applies to what Rubab was. She was bearing testimony to all of the goodness of her husband, and again, of her lost children. I mean, just imagining what she went through, and all of them went through, is just, yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so basically, I think that you're right. That is something that makes the story universal. It's something that can speak to anyone, and something that I think it does, like in our daily lives. Just inevitably, whatever little difficulties we go through, we can take courage in stories like that. That there have been those, if you will, blessed among our race, that of human beings who have, you know, passed the test. They,
Right.
they
Right.
became exemplars, became martyrs in the true sense of the word, which is to witness. And I think that that is something that makes Muharram such a special month, and something that I do hope more people outside of the Muslim tradition, especially in the West, pay more attention to, that it is something that exists. Because I know when I first learned about it, I thought that too. I'm like, I wish I knew this story a long time
Right.
ago. Because we have in the West this very, you know,
Right.
Hollywood generated
Right.
image of stories coming out of the Muslim world and the Middle East, etc. And yet there are these real rich, deep stories that come from that
Right.
religious tradition and culture and everything else, which we don't know, we don't pay attention to, and instead we just take tropes from Hollywood. So, I
Yeah.
hope that will change with time. I hope people, and again, I hope I can do my little bit to making people more
Absolutely.
aware of the story.
Yes, and we have this responsibility, that I hope that everyone listening, or knowing about this story of Karbala and the personality of Imam Hussein, to share this with the masses, like you rightly mentioned, the personality of Lady Zainab and how she converted a very bad situation that definitely is, beyond bad. It's traumatic, but she
Hmm.
converted it to a positive thing, and she equates it to beauty. Why? Because anything that leads, if your trajectory leads yourself to God the Almighty, it's beauty. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
whether you're martyred or you're not. As long as your trajectory is towards God the Almighty, He's gonna take care of you. There is no worries. Just depend on Him and Him alone. And I want to wrap up with just a quick prayer for all of those who are oppressed. There's a lot going on. Every time we turn on the TV or on YouTube, it's very draining, and we need to continue to promote resistance against oppression in line with the legacy of Imam Hussein. We need to be strong. We need to not bow down to the powers that be for the sake of any personal interest. And we pray that God enables us to truly embody ourselves and embellish ourselves with some of these noble characteristics, so that we can walk away with something that can help us to self-reform ourselves, because surely we're all not perfect. There's definitely a lot of room for improvement, and together, as you and I improve, that's how we make a better place for others and ourselves to live in. So thank you so much, Evelina. I really, really appreciate. I enjoyed this discussion with you. I thought it was very insightful, and I'm sure the viewers will also learn a lot from your perspective. And I wish you all the best. And of course, we'll always be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nasreen. Really appreciate it. Salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone.